Hi, it's Carpo here. I'd like to tell you why I support Bernie Sanders. And before I do, I would really like to touch base with all of you and just step back for a moment and realize if we can't talk about politics without getting angry at one another, we will never solve the problems that we have in our society, or in our own lives for that matter. I haven't made a video about Bernie Sanders in 4 years, since the last election. And I did vote for Bernie in the last election, even knowing that he wouldn't win. And a lot of folks at the time would say, well, why would you waste a vote? And I would say it's not a waste of a vote when I don't support either of the other candidates. I absolutely find Hillary Clinton disgusting. Her policies, her past. But I also feel the same way about Trump. Now, I don't want this to turn into an argument, so I'm hoping you'll hear me out and see where I'm coming from. I will make the promise in this video to not talk bad about Trump supporters or insult Trump himself or anyone on that side, because I know that goes nowhere. I've had discussions with people where they instantly think I'm on the Trump hate train, where I hate everything about him. I don't like the guy. I don't like the policies he's implemented. I don't like his ego or anything about him. But I still gave him a few years and said, well, maybe some of these policies will actually benefit us. I do not know. But I will tell you this. The one benefit to Trump being in office was, and this was what many people who voted for him agreed on, it shakes up the establishment. And that was the best bet we could ask for. So I'm kind of, grinding my teeth, by admitting that, yeah, it was a good thing. It really shook shit up. And even though I may not agree with the policies or what's been implemented, it doesn't mean that I can't respect the progress that it may come in the future because of it. So now I'm going to go into Bernie Sanders and why I support him for this election. And my intention here is in hopes anyone who's on the fence about Trump or Sanders might hear some aspects of this that would help them decide. And I'm not trying to convince you of how to vote, of course. But I think there are a lot of misunderstandings about Bernie. And the reason I say Bernie or Trump is because it surprises a lot of people that many of the Trump supporters who voted for Trump in 2016 said that they were on the fence, they were trying to decide between Trump and Bernie. But since Bernie didn't make it, and the DNC screwed him over, as the Democrats always do, they didn't really have a choice. So they voted for Trump. But why would somebody be on the fence about somebody who's called a socialist and somebody who's a capitalist? It shows that humans in this country don't necessarily value all the things that we think that they value. And I mean they as we, as an institution, as a nation. I support Bernie because he's real, he's true. But more than that, because that's one of the things about Trump. He as well speaks his mind, says what he wants to say. But the thing is, I don't agree with the way he goes about it. So therefore, I'm just looking for somebody who will, hopefully, let's just say the idea was to drain the swamp. We all remember that quote. But we have more billionaires in office than ever before. We have lobbyists in the Secretary of the Treasury, the state, the top. I don't want to go into all the people who are in office right now who are millionaires and billionaires themselves, but the system is not working for the people, and the people are sick of it. So the three things that I want to cover before I go on is, what are the three aspects of Bernie Sanders that most people poke fun at? Because the other day, Trump posted a tweet, and it said, wow, crazy Bernie Sanders, and this is part of the problem I have, is that Trump always gives people nicknames, insulting nicknames, because that's part of his game. But it says, crazy Bernie Sanders is surging in the polls, looking very good against his opponents in the do-nothing party. So what does this all mean? Stay tuned. And the response from Bernie on Twitter was, it means you're going to lose. And I found a lot of humor in that. Bernie is not one to hold back. He speaks his mind. He tells it like he feels it. But let's just step back and look at the track record here. But first, I'd like to analyze the three aspects I mentioned that most people go and say, well, this is why I wouldn't vote for Bernie. He's either too old, and that's the worst excuse I can possibly hear, because most presidents have been old. Trump is old. I mean, why does that matter? But I understand that aspect of it, and so does he. And he's addressed that. He's healthy. He's been to, he's had a checkup recently. He used to run marathons. The guy keeps in shape. But the thing is, most important is if you hear him speak, his mind is sharp. Now, he had a Fox town hall. He went on Fox News and did a town hall 6 months ago. And I would urge anyone who's actually going to vote and curious about Bernie to watch that. Because he was willing to go on Fox News and talk with them about his ideas for the future without saying, well, I refuse to go on Fox News because they're biased. Because all the media is biased. And that's the connection I want to make with all of you. If any Trump supporters, which likely if you are a Trump supporter, you probably already turned this off. It seems like a lot of people don't want to hear any other aspect. And I don't mean that insulting, but people are just sick of politics. But really look at the big picture, and ask yourself, what do we want as a nation? And there's really three main things. We want health care. We want a good, decent jobs with pay. And, well, I guess I can't really get into the third because there are many different aspects of this. Different people have different opinions about what's important. Some people want to pull out of war. Some people want to remove regulations. Some people want to enact regulations. But the most important issues are that we survive, that we exist, and that we're able to feed our families. So healthcare and jobs are hugely important. So let me ask you this. Over the past 3 years, people look at the State of the Union, they look and they say, well, there's more jobs. It seems that way anyway. Everything's just fine and we're growing, and therefore Trump must have enacted all of this that helps us. Perhaps some of his policies have helped us. I'm not denying that. What I'm saying is that in the long run, after the 2008 financial crisis, when Obama completely failed the people by selling out to Wall Street, which I'm ashamed that somebody I supported, Obama, actually would completely let down his base. But that's the world we live in. The question I want to get to is, because there's two other aspects of this, and I know I don't have a lot of notes here, so I'm not really able to vocalize this the way I wanted, but I feel it would be more natural if I just spoke from the heart. Bernie wants to, the three things, okay? The one is that people say Bernie's too old. The next one is they call him a socialist. And that one just the third one is the one that's the most absurd. That Bernie's a millionaire, and people say, well, even Trump once said, he said Bernie's burning fossil fuels, and he's a millionaire, and he's telling everybody else how to live. This is the way that politics have always been. If you're not wealthy, you can't run for office. I mean, in the Democratic Party, we have Tom Steyer and Bloomberg. Look at these guys. I mean, billionaires without a fucking clue about what the people want or need. These are people who may have had some good policies in the past, maybe not. But I'm not going to vote for a billionaire because I know that they're out of touch with the people. Yeah, Bernie's got a few bucks, but you know what? The few million bucks that he has, he actually earned it on the book he wrote after the 2016 election. This guy has worked for the people for almost all of his life. And he spoke against the war. Back in the Iraq war, you go back and look at who was supporting this. And he knew damn well that we were going in there for, illegitimate reasons, and it would turn into a Vietnam. I had conversations with people during that time. I was going to do a completely separate video about the million or more lives that have been lost in Iraq and Afghanistan, including civilians, contractors, military personnel. You're never given the full picture. War is something that's out of the public's mind because we don't face it in this nation. But I want a president who's going to actually make the attempt to avoid war and pull us out of these conflicts. And when we're sending more troops over, as we have been lately, it just goes down that same road. So the millionaire aspect of him is really irrelevant. The fact that he's old is pretty irrelevant in my eyes. The fact that he's a socialist, let me just break that down for a minute. I know socialism is a complicated issue. We are a socialist democracy. You can call it whatever you want. It all comes down to semantics, wordplay. What do you want to call our society? Okay? Socialism if you look up the definition of socialism, it's working to make sure that all the people are taken care of. It's pretty simple. The question is, and this is one I hear quite often, I guess, not the question, but the statement is, why should I guess, I shouldn't have to pay for other people's health care, or I shouldn't have to pay for other people's being down on their luck, or to help homeless, or to help opioid addicts. None of this, I shouldn't have to pay this. But the fact is, you do. You pay taxes. You pay 20-30% of your income into the federal government. These plans, these programs are already enacted. Your money is already going into it. When you buy food at the grocery store, taxes. When you buy alcohol, taxes. When you buy gasoline, taxes. When you go get your registration and drive your car, everything you pay is taxes, and this goes into the system. When it comes down to being a socialist society, you have to acknowledge most of us went to school, and I'm guessing all of you probably went to school for at least a certain amount of time, right? Who pays for these schools? You do. Your tax dollars do. Society has been voting against its own schools for so long now because we see how much money has been wasted by, those on top. The school administration, all of them, it's horrible the amount of money that they waste. But the point being, it's a socialist program. But let me get into something a little more obvious and maybe less thought about. The military. What is the military? It's a program that each one of us pay for, a socialist program that helps us protect our interests. It's way overgrown, and we spend more than the next 7 countries combined, and we spend probably half of our tax money on war. But all that aside, the fact is, it is a socialist program. It's either socialist democracy or anarchy, or call it a republic, but that's the problem. I think we get too twisted up about what America should be or what we think it is. We're the people. We represent this country. So I'm not going to say I know best when half the nation's voting for Trump. Say, hey, there's something there. There's something that needs to be understood. People need to get their feelings out and really express how they feel without arguing with one another. Because, like I said, I think a lot of people who support Trump also would support Bernie. Because they're completely different people. But really what we want is change. And so, maybe 4 years ago we weren't ready for Bernie. Maybe. But perhaps today, after we've been through so much, why wouldn't we give it a chance? If you're over 60 and you're looking towards collecting your Social Security, just remember where some of these benefits, we pay into it, but that's part of our tax system. It's a socialist program. I believe it was it Roosevelt, or I can't recall who exactly enacted that. Oh, FDR, I think. But, learning about history, it's something that most of us, and I'm sure a lot of you admit this too, we don't know the full history of our country. We hear these little bits and pieces, and you can read and dig deep, and you're still getting this propagandized version of it, a bastardized version of reality. And so we're all privy to what information we think we have. And I think that we are all closer in our needs and desires than we really think. When Trump ran, he said that one of his plans was to give health insurance to everyone. And he said that verbatim. It's in his speeches. But millions of people have lost health care. And so I'm only going to touch on this briefly. But I had a discussion with someone the other day. It was a long comment, and we went back and forth. And he said, I support Trump because, I don't want my health care being messed with. I don't want, and this is one of the main issues with Bernie, is that he wants to, give free health care to everyone, and people are saying, how are you going to pay for this? It's a complicated issue that most of us don't understand, and that's okay. But let's just think of it this way. If we don't have to pay the deductibles anymore, if we don't have to make payments to insurance anymore, and if we can get healthcare costs down like we should, since out of all the civilized countries, or I should say the Western countries, we are actually the lowest on our care as well as the affordability of medicine. I think that we can pull our heads out of our butts and start realize that we actually have enough money to do this. it's going to cost a lot of money to take care of people's health, of course, but not everybody's going to rush to the doctor tomorrow to use up their medical benefits. The thing is, people go to the doctor when they need to, and preventative maintenance, preventative care, it's what we do with our automobiles, it's what we do with our businesses, and we have to do it with our body. And I know people who won't go to the doctor because they can't afford it. And let me tell you, I'm one of them, okay? I made a video last year talking about getting my teeth fixed. I spent all the money I'd saved up to get crowns on my top teeth. My dad lost most of his teeth before he was 20. It's just genetics in our case, and I ate a lot of sugar. But the point being that that was my own fault, but perhaps, but what if tomorrow I get all of a sudden get sick from some illness that came out of some exposure I had at work, somewhere I worked or something? What does that do for me when I can't go to the hospital and even get a diagnosis? I'm afraid to go to the doctor because of the cost. So for me, healthcare is a huge priority. But anyhow, the discussion I had with the person the other day, they were saying, I don't want, I like Trump because I want to keep my health plan, and I don't want anybody messing with my health plan. And I said, but your employer pays for your health, right? And they said, yeah. I said, if you think about it, if the employer has to pay less for healthcare, or if the employers no longer have to pay for healthcare, that will give them more money freed up to raise wages. It'll also give you more money for not having to have out-of-pocket costs, and maybe they can still have out-of-pocket. The point being that what is the most crucial thing is that we're healthy. We're all going to die one day. We're all in this together. And even though we have a lot of differences, we have one similarity, is that we all are going to die and we all get sick. And preventing that is crucial to people. And so for all the people out there who have healthcare and are happy with your healthcare, congratulations, I think that's great. But just think for a minute about those of us who don't. And the guy I was talking with said, well, get a job. I said, people don't understand. When you're an entrepreneur, when I started my carpentry business, I had to work from the ground up, let's say. Same with my herb business. But you don't get healthcare benefits if you're an entrepreneur. What this does is forces a lot of people out of that sector, and they go off to work for Amazon, Google, or one of the larger companies. Every time this happens, it means that there's less competition, less innovation, and less small businesses. We need entrepreneurs. But they're forced out by the larger companies and by the fact that they can't afford healthcare. If I were to buy healthcare for my family, it would cost me probably more than my mortgage. And I just can't afford that. And we did the math, and over the past 20 years, with my wife, my kids, and myself, we would have spent somewhere in the range of $80,000 to $100,000 in premiums if we were to pay for a plan that was actually worthy. Because even if you buy a cheap plan, you still have to pay it's horrible, the way the system is set up. And people should not be afraid to go to the doctor in a day and age where the pharmaceutical industries are making billions on drugs that have been sold for years. And that's one of Bernie's main gripes, is taking on pharma. A lot of presidents have said it, but Bernie's actually done it. He actually stands up for what he thinks is right, and he doesn't back down. He could be a little more vocal about certain things, but he understands the importance of tact and demeanor. And that is something that I value highly. So a healthier nation equals more money. So when you look at it like this, billions of dollars are lost each year to sick days, to people not, able to take care of themselves, anything from a toothache to you name it. These are things that are preventable and can be taken care of. But for some reason, we think it's going to cost us more to take care of one another. If you've been sick, you know where I'm coming from. And I've kind of rubbed this subject into the ground, but healthcare is a crucial thing. And the only people who don't care about it or don't really think about it are the ones who get it through their employer. My wife has worked for the same employer for 20 years now, and they don't have healthcare still. It's just one of those things, So another aspect of Bernie that I really like is, and one of the hopes that I have is to pull our military out of proxy wars. A proxy war is just a chessboard. It's like what's going on in the Middle East, where we're supporting one group, Russia's supporting some other group, perhaps China or Korea, you name it. All these countries are just funneling weapons to these groups, and we're fighting like we're moving pieces on a chessboard for our interests. And Trump was pretty open the other day when he actually said that we're keeping troops over there to protect the oil, to take the oil. He said it several times, and at least that's the one benefit to having Trump in office. He says it like he hears it. He says it like he feels it. He's given away probably more of the reality of what's going on than he realizes, but he doesn't care because that's his thing, and that's a benefit. The transparency of the Trump administration is a huge benefit to us. And the fact that he, sends out like 20 tweets a day, you get so much more information out of there than you would out of the media. So this is where I kind of agree on this, some of the things that he says about the media. It's not that it's fake news. It's only fake news when they're talking bad about him. And so that's kind of the problem that I have. I wish he was as bold and as, I wish he would just stand up for all people the way he stands up for himself or those who support him. Because, that kind of attitude can go a long way if you have, the right values. But getting off topic here. My thought on Bernie is that he's the best bet. Nobody's perfect. There are some issues over the last few years that I've pointed out to my wife. I'm like, well, I don't really believe in giving free college to everyone. I don't. I really don't. But I do believe in an education. And I know people can't afford an education. So that's a difficult one for me. The problem with me isn't that I don't believe we should spend money on education. It's that I think that colleges are a big scam for the most part. And far too many people get sucked into, these long debts that they can't afford merely to have a, basic education. But if that was free, I guess maybe it wouldn't be such a bad thing. I just know that if it goes to the public sector, that means that people will nickel and dime the tax dollars. We have to have watchdogs, we have to be aware, we have to know how much money we're spending on things. We need to negotiate drug prices in Canada or elsewhere. They're already doing it in India and other places where a majority of these drugs are manufactured. But yeah, drugs are a huge part of healthcare, of course. So I'd just like to say this. Nobody really understands the system 100%. Any one of you or me or us who stands up and says, I know the best system and I know how the country should operate, we know we're full of it. So with that, perhaps we can step back a little bit, shake hands, say, what is the best bet and the best path forward? Do we want more bold vulgarity? Has what we had happened over the last few years, has that benefited us? And if so, in what ways? And then we have to weigh that with the benefits of what we think should be happening. Because I'll tell you, a lot of people are hung up on terms like NAFTA, TPP, and these little signed waivers and vetoes and trade negotiations. Think about it for a minute. These things impact us all, but not as much as the most important things to us. We're being completely distracted from the crucial aspects of life, which is healthcare in this nation, the thing that people have always wanted. A healthcare. We want our military to come home so we can take care of our own borders, and we want to improve our economy. So we can do that through more entrepreneurship, removing the barriers to starting your own business, lowering tax rates for self-employed people, and giving them the insurance that allows them to function and feed and protect their families. Those are my thoughts on it. For anyone who's still hung up on the socialism thing, which seems to be the main argument against Bernie, I would like to say this. We already have socialism. We have socialism for the rich. A lot of folks don't know that Congress has their own health insurance plan, and they're paid and protected for life. So, take from it what you will. Hope you learned something, and let me know what you all think about Bernie Sanders. I think he's the best bet for this election. Take care, my friends.